So I was scrolling my timeline and I stumbled across a clip from the Higher Learning podcast. Shout out to Van Lathan and Rachel Lindsay, where they were discussing a clip from a 2021 North Carolina Republican National Convention. And there was a gentleman there, I don't know the gentleman's name, and he was telling an anecdote, a story about discussing reparations with a liberal and stating how no one owes the victims of slavery anything for reparations. If anything, the victims of slavery owe. And he just gave a bunch of just weird, emotionally charged rants about why he felt that way. And none of them made sense and they didn't really hit. But, and then afterwards, Van had comments about the tactic that this gentleman was using. And then he went to discuss what reparations are. And that's the part that interested me. I've had and heard discussions about reparations and for the victims of slavery in this country, and I never really did any type of deep dive, or any type of research on what exactly reparations are. I mean, I try to use good or common sense in what I've heard or what I know of reparations to different entities throughout world history, specifically the Jewish community from the Holocaust and World War II. But I never really looked into the specifics, starting with even the actual definition of reparations. So I started there. I went online and I Googled reparations, and the Merriam-Webster dictionary has 3 different definitions of reparation. The first is a repairing or a keeping in repair. And then reparations, plural, is repairs. The second is the act of making amends, offering expiation, or giving satisfaction for a wrong or injury. Something done or given as amends or satisfaction. And then the third is the payment of damages, indemnification, and then specifically referencing compensation in money or materials payable by a defeated nation for damages to or expenditures sustained by another nation as a result of hostilities with the defeated nation, usually used in plural, reparations. And, reading those definitions, it definitely started the wheels turning for me, as to, okay, I'm starting to understand or get a better understanding of, at least from this perspective, why reparations for slavery in the United States are met with such resistance. But what I wanted to do is find out how the victims of the Holocaust and World War II, the Jewish people, how they were granted reparations. How was it determined that there were reparations to be made and how they were granted? And so I go back to the definition that it's compensation in money or materials payable by a defeated nation. So with that definition in regards to the reparations made to the victims of the Holocaust and of World War II, Germany, East and West Germany, are the defeated nation in World War II. and they were made to pay war reparations by the Allied governments, in the peace treaties that were created. So Germany did not decide on its own that it should pay the victims of its own horrible policy and practice with regards to the Jewish population. They didn't just grow a conscience and say, oh, okay, we're going to give these folks some money. They lost a war and were made to pay as part of a peace treaty. That didn't happen in the United States. There was a civil war. The United States fought against itself, and from the things that I saw when I researched, there was more compensation paid to the slave owners or former slave owners who lost slaves than there were to the people who were slaves. Meaning the government was trying to acknowledge, okay, we know in this war you lost your free labor. We want to compensate you. But these people who were the free labor and who were the enslaved, every time something was proposed to make restitution, including 40 acres and a mule, it was rescinded, denied, revoked, because it was exactly what it sounds like. The country voting against its own interest. Economically, it went against the interests of the United States to pay for its own wrongdoings. Which I'm sure that if there were a function or a faction in Germany at the time that World War II happened, and it was left up to the devices of Germany within Germany to make or decide whether they were going to make reparations or restitution to the Jewish community, they would have been going through the same thing. There's humanity and then there's economics. And do you expect the perpetrator of these great wrongs to, if it took a war to get them to stop doing it, do you think that that's going to all of a sudden fix their conscience and make them feel like, oh man, this was messed up? We need to pay these victims for the shit that we did. Like, they already feel like they lost because they lost the war. They fought for the right to keep the crimes against humanity, this inhumane treatment going. They fought for that right to try to do that, to keep doing that. So there's that. I looked to see if there were any instances in world history where reparations were paid out in any civil war. Was there ever an instance that a country fought amongst itself with the two opposing views, and that the defeated view, the country decided that it was going to give reparations and restitution to the victims of those crimes against humanity within its own nation, that it was going to make its constituents that were victims of the prior regime make them financially whole. And I couldn't find any. Not saying that there isn't any, I just couldn't find any. Again, what I saw is that throughout world history, the times that reparations were paid out, World War I and World War II, were the big ones that I saw online. It was always the victor of the conflict made the defeated pay for their crimes and for the damages inflicted from the conflict to overthrow them or to stop whatever they were doing. It was never the country, it was never the defeated country deciding that they were going to make right what they had done wrong. So when we're having conversations around reparations and we're trying to introduce legislation, understand that we're trying to get a nation that very much still shows the DNA and the expression of white supremacy to basically vote against its own interest. We have modern day slavery with the industrial prison complex, and there is millions and millions of signs of institutional racism and white supremacy weaved throughout this nation's fabric currently. And to say, that these powers that gain benefit from this practice are going to say, listen, we're going to come out our pockets and make you people whole. I mean, not only do they still not believe that there shouldn't be slavery, the expectation is that they're actually going to peacefully say, here's the $14 trillion that is estimated that it would take to repair the financial damage and gap that slavery in the United States caused for its victims. It kind of blew my mind a little bit, the thought process and actually learning the details and like just using some basic critical thinking skills to determine why is this such a big deal? And it makes sense with the definition and then the actual execution of reparations that I found in on the internet with regards to world history and conflicts. Not saying that reparations can't be achieved, but I understand now part of the reason why it's such an issue and why the purveyors of this country have an issue. And I guess the bigger statement is, you're asking for an entity that profited off of another group's demise, to grow a conscience and say, and then admit to wrongdoing, and then actually grant restitution to their own detriment because it's the right thing to do. And if you're, part of this nation in a capitalistic society where economically it's about getting to the top regardless of who you have to step on, and then staying at the top regardless of who you have to step on. Economically, reparations doesn't make sense to the United States and its establishment. And that's why it seems as if, even in definition, that reparations are not self-determined. It's always the outside entity that actually defeated the oppressor and the aggressor that makes them. We're charging you and we're telling you, you did what you did and you will make it right. And that's not the conversation that's being had. We're making a request, not a demand. And we don't have any leverage to force them to pay. I'm sure that in these negotiations and these treaties, it was, if you don't sign this, it's going to get real bad for you. We don't even have leverage like that. We're not saying, well, if you don't pay us reparations, we're not going to pay taxes anymore. We don't even have the power to do that. We don't have the power to take away our financial contribution to this country, to force them. We don't have the means, military or otherwise, to say we're going to destroy your infrastructure through combat if you don't pay us and make it right what you did. We don't have any of that. We're trying to vote. We're asking for them to say, hey, look at what you did. Consider how bad you made it for us. And please pay us and compensate us for what you did to us. That's like asking the thief, after he got away with you with your goods, seeing him in the street, not having anything, and asking them, can they please give you your stuff back? Please show mercy. I believe that reparations are owed. I believe that reparations are necessary. But I also understand now part of the reason why it's not happening. And I appreciate what's happening in California. When it starts to actually be distributed, then I'll believe it. Because we didn't even get 40 acres and a mule when they tried to do that. Till the next time, the truth lies here.